In the early 1900s, the Osage Nation in Oklahoma became incredibly wealthy after oil was discovered beneath their lands. Suddenly, members of the Osage tribe started dying under suspicious circumstances. Poisonings, shootings, and unexplained accidents became alarmingly common. Wealthy Osage families were targeted so that white guardians, lawyers, and local opportunists could inherit their money. This series of calculated killings became known as the Osage Indian murders. At first, local authorities dismissed these deaths as coincidences. However, the unusual frequency of deaths among rich Osage members could not be ignored. Some deaths appeared violent, others were sudden illnesses, and the common factor was that the victims were heirs to large oil fortunes. The pattern finally drew national attention when families began requesting federal intervention. The Osage people were terrified. Entire families were decimated, and the tribe's trust in outsiders vanished. Life in Osage County became tense and oppressive, as every interaction with white settlers carried potential danger. Even after arrests, grief lingered for decades, as the tribe had lost numerous leaders and family members. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, later the FBI, led a detailed probe under a young J. Edgar Hoover. They discovered that many murders were orchestrated by William Hale, a local cattleman, who had positioned himself and his relatives to inherit Osage wealth. The investigation revealed a web of bribery, corruption, and collusion among local officials. The primary suspect, William Hale, manipulated legal guardianships and orchestrated multiple murders. Accomplices included his nephews, corrupt law enforcement officers, and hired killers. The conspirators used a combination of poisoning, shootings, and staged accidents to eliminate targets. Hale and several accomplices were eventually convicted and sent to prison. Some victims' killers, however, were never punished. The case led to reforms in federal oversight of Native American affairs and remains a chilling example of greed-driven murders in American history. The New York Conspiracy of 1741, also called the Slave Insurrection of 1741, involved a series of alleged plots by enslaved Africans and poor whites to burn down New York City. At the time, New York was a bustling colonial city with a large enslaved population. Fear and paranoia spread as fires mysteriously broke out across the city. Authorities claimed these fires were part of a planned revolt to overthrow white colonists. It all began with a small fire in a building on April 6, 1741. Though the fire caused limited damage, it triggered panic. Authorities began investigating and soon linked the incident to other fires throughout the city. Rumors spread that enslaved Africans, along with poor white allies, were conspiring to burn down the city, attack wealthy citizens, and escape to freedom. The city plunged into fear. White citizens panicked, believing a massive rebellion was imminent. Mass arrests followed. Over 150 people, both black and white, were accused of participating in the conspiracy. The social fabric of New York was shattered as trust between neighbors, and even within households, was replaced with suspicion and terror. Authorities held trials in a climate of hysteria. Evidence was often based on rumors, coerced confessions, or testimony extracted under extreme duress. The legal process was highly irregular by modern standards, but at the time, the city government felt the stakes justified harsh measures. The accused included enslaved Africans and some poor white apprentices. Notable suspects included a young enslaved woman named Mary Burton, whose testimony implicated dozens of others in the conspiracy. Many of the accused were accused simply because they were marginalized members of society, making them easy targets for scapegoating. In total, 34 people were executed, including 13 women, and more than 70 were imprisoned or deported. Historians now believe that while some fires were deliberately set, the scale of the alleged conspiracy was likely exaggerated by mass hysteria and fear of rebellion. The event remains a dark reminder of how fear and prejudice can drive legal injustice in history. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, also known as the Phantom Killer Attacks, were a string of violent assaults that terrorized the twin cities of Texarkana on the border of Texas and Arkansas. In 1946, over the course of a few months, a masked attacker targeted young couples parked in secluded areas, known as lovers' lanes. The killer would assault, and in some cases murder, the victims, leaving the town gripped with fear. The first known attack occurred on February 22, 1946, when Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were ambushed. Mary Jean survived, reporting a masked assailant who used a gun. Over the next several weeks, other attacks and murders were reported, escalating panic among residents. The random nature and brutality of the assaults made everyone feel unsafe, especially young couples. The attacks caused widespread fear in Texarkana. Many couples avoided dating in secluded areas, and community curfews were informally enforced. Newspapers sensationalized the murders, calling the perpetrator the Phantom Killer, and the panic permeated daily life. Local businesses and schools adjusted schedules to minimize risk, and residents armed themselves for protection. Law enforcement conducted extensive patrols and questioned hundreds of residents, but the killer proved elusive. Despite setting up roadblocks and searching suspicious areas, the assailant was never caught. Psychological profiling at the time was primitive, so authorities relied heavily on eyewitness accounts and circumstantial evidence. Numerous suspects were questioned, including local men with criminal records, but no charges were ever filed. Some theories suggested the Phantom Killer may have been someone who lived in or frequently visited the area, but no definitive identity was established. Rumors and false confessions added to the confusion, but the true perpetrator remained a mystery. The attack ceased after a few months, but the Phantom Killer was never caught. The case remains officially unsolved, making it one of America's most famous unsolved serial killer cases. The town of Texarkana continues to memorialize the events, and the murders remain a chilling story of fear, randomness, and the unknown. The Springfield race riot of 1908 was a violent racial conflict in Springfield, Illinois, the hometown of Abraham Lincoln. Tensions between white and black residents had been growing due to economic competition, rumors of crime, and entrenched racial prejudice. In August 1908, the city erupted into chaos after allegations of a black man assaulting a white woman spread through town, sparking a violent white mob targeting the black community. The alleged crime involved a young white woman claiming she had been assaulted by a black man. Though the facts were never fully verified, the accusation spread rapidly, igniting outrage among the white population. Newspapers fanned the flames with sensational reporting, framing the event as a moral threat to the community. The riot resulted in the deaths of at least 2 black men and dozens injured. Homes and businesses in black neighborhoods were burned, and hundreds of black families fled Springfield to escape the violence. The local economy and social trust were deeply damaged, and the city gained national notoriety as a site of racial violence. Authorities initially struggled to control the mob, and law enforcement often participated in or condoned attacks on black residents. Subsequent investigations focused on restoring order rather than delivering justice. Federal attention eventually prompted some legal actions, but many perpetrators were never prosecuted. The riot exposed systemic failures in policing and racial justice. The primary suspect was the alleged assailant in the original accusation. But the riot itself involved hundreds of white rioters. Community leaders, police officers, and local authorities were also implicated for either inciting, failing to prevent, or participating in the violence. The riot subsided after several days due to the intervention of state militia and federal attention. The tragedy spurred national debate about race relations and contributed directly to the founding of the NAACP National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. However, the immediate community remained fractured, and justice for the black victims was largely denied. On the night of June 10, 1912, the quiet town of Villisca, Iowa, was shaken by a horrific crime. 8 people, including 6 children, were brutally murdered in their beds with an axe. The victims were members of the Moore family, Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children and 2 visiting children. The scene was gruesome, with the axe left at the scene, blood covering walls and furniture, and the victims seemingly asleep when attacked. The murders were discovered the following morning by neighbors, who noticed no lights or activity in the Moore household. Entering the house, they found the shocking scene. Panic quickly spread through the small town, and local law enforcement sealed off the house. Word traveled fast, drawing the attention of newspapers and authorities from surrounding areas. The town was thrown into fear and grief. Families locked their doors, and children were kept close to home. The murders left a lasting scar on the community, with townsfolk haunted by the brutality of the crime. Villisca became infamous nationwide as a site of one of America's most mysterious mass murders. Investigators combed through the house for clues. They found fingerprints, footprints, and the axe itself, but no definitive evidence pointing to a clear suspect. Many theories emerged, including wandering strangers, a disgruntled neighbor, and even a local minister. The investigation was hampered by lack of modern forensic techniques and conflicting testimonies. Multiple individuals were suspected over the years, including Reverend George Kelly, a man with a history of violent behavior and alleged insanity, and a few local residents who had disputes with the Moore family. Despite arrests and interrogations, no one was ever convicted for the murders. The case officially remained unsolved. Over the decades, Villisca Axe murder house became a site of legend, attracting historians, paranormal enthusiasts, and true crime investigators. While theories abound, the identity of the murderer remains a mystery, making it one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in American history.